In the imagination of many, Europe is a crowded, civilized, densely populated tourist destination where everything runs smoothly, is wealthy, and stable. At first glance, the European picture still looks very beautiful. The square is crowded, the city is brightly lit. Tourist spots are always packed. But as you move out of the central area, a little further, a completely different Europe begins to emerge. There are villages where the population is less than 20 people, and the youngest person is over 60. Abandoned houses are being sold for €1, but no one dares to buy them. An entire region has been left like a historical site. So, what exactly happened to Europe? And why do places like this still exist in 2026? I carried that question with me and ventured into these almost isolated lands on my own, and I realized the truth isn't as simple as we've always been told. Before we go any further, it's important to clarify something. These places are not always completely abandoned. They don't disappear overnight, and they're not located in the most remote parts of Europe either. The problem here isn't just the lack of people. What's more noteworthy is how these communities are gradually being separated from the mainstream of society, from the economy, from services, from the future. That's why I don't simply call them abandoned villages. I call them isolated. It's not because there's no way in, but because there's no reason for anyone to go in anymore. And when a place is isolated long enough, it doesn't just lose its population, it loses its ability to return to normal life. I started this journey not too far from Berlin. Just a few hours drive away. It's not remote at all, nor is it deep in the mountains or on a distant border. However, the moment I stepped into this village, my first feeling was there was no one there. No store, no coffee shop, no buses. I walked for nearly 15 minutes, passing houses that still had their roofs, doors, and even flowers planted in front of the porches, but I didn't see a single living person. It is known that the official population of the village is less than 20 people, and they are all elderly. An older man I met later said very softly, "It's not poor here, it's just that no one is young anymore." And that's the key point. This is not the image of poverty that the media often uses when talking about the developing world. This is European-style aging, silently, tidy, no cries for help. A society that doesn't collapse. It contracted, like a small flame gradually dying out due to lack of oxygen. Leaving Germany, I went to the southeast European region, Bulgaria and Serbia. The story here isn't hidden, it's evident right from the numbers. In Reshaped, a village in Serbia near the Bulgarian border, the village is almost completely deserted after state-owned factories closed. Bars, houses, streets, everything is empty. Serbia has even become famous for this phenomenon, and the issue has now reached national proportions. In Skomlia, Bulgaria, a riverside community that thrived before 1990, there are now fewer than 20 people, and the youngest is 61 years old. Yes, you heard right. There are no children or young people here. That also means there will be no next generation. An old woman in Bulgaria told me half-jokingly, "We don't need schools anymore, just more cemeteries." It sounds bitter, but that's the reality. Other places like Kotomori in Moldova were already in decline, but climate change has accelerated this process. It all stems from the market reforms of the 1990s. The common point of these places is that they once had factories, schools, etc. However, as the old economic models disappeared, young people also began to leave in search of work, and then they didn't come back. The rest are those who cannot or do not want to leave. A society where youth becomes a memory, and the future is just an abstract concept. We often hear that Europe's problem is a lack of housing and living space, but standing here, amidst the empty streets, the question is completely reversed. If there's no one to live here, then what are we missing? Then I went to Italy and Spain, where the press loves to mention villages selling houses for €1. Sounds like a bargain, €1 cheaper than a cup of coffee in Rome. But when you ask deeper, you'll understand. Cheap doesn't mean easy to live in. These villages often have no jobs, there are no schools, there are no hospitals nearby. A man in southern Italy told me straight, "You can buy a house for €1. but what will you do on Monday? And that's the question that advertising never answers. Here, the problem isn't a lack of housing. The problem is the lack of people who are young enough, stable enough, and confident enough to start a new life. It feels like Europe has a vast real estate treasure trove, but there aren't enough people left who want to sign a contract with the future. Europe is not lacking in policies. There's no shortage of conferences. There's no shortage of reports, hundreds of pages thick. All that's missing are children running down the village road. What do you think? If the problem is just that Berlin is too crowded, why will these places still be empty in 2026? If the solution is just to build more houses, why are there thousands of existing houses that no one is living in? Do you think this is a natural cycle of modern society, or a consequence of choices we were never asked about? And when you put all these pieces together, from East Germany, Bulgaria, Serbia, to Italy and Spain, a bigger question begins to emerge. Are these just scattered blind spots, or are they signs of a deeper, pan-European problem? If you find these questions worth further thought, stay with me, because the next part is where the real picture truly begins to emerge. If you live in Berlin or have spent enough time here, you'll see the problem becoming increasingly clear. Rent prices are rising. The housing is cramped. It was crowded. The press calls it a housing crisis. Yes, but it all boils down to reporting. When leaving Berlin, the picture is no longer seamless. I've stood in places a few hours' drive from the center, where there are more houses than people, and where schools are closed because there are no more students. And then the question arose, if Europe is so overpopulated, where did these ghost villages come from? The media often tells a very concise story. Too many people, too few houses. The solution is to build more, add more, and expand more. That sounds reasonable, until you look at the cold, hard data. In many European countries, the birth rate has fallen below 1.5. Simply put, each subsequent generation is smaller than the previous one. And the logic of population is not at all complex. A family without children, a house will be empty. A family with only one child, not enough to replace. To maintain the population, each family needs more than 2 children. Mathematics doesn't require political opinions. So why is the story of being too crowded repeated so often? Perhaps it's easier to look at Berlin than at all of Europe. Perhaps because the crowd in the center obscures the silence on the periphery. Or simply because slow decline doesn't make for sensational headlines. A person I met in East Germany told me this. There's no shortage of houses here. We lack people young enough to stay. It sounds very calm, and it's also very difficult to refute. Europe isn't exploding from overpopulation, it's hollowing out from within. So the real question isn't, how do we fit more people into the city? But rather, why are fewer and fewer people willing or able to build a life outside of those centers? If you find this question worth delving into further, please stay with me a little longer. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, consider it a way not to miss any missing pieces. Because right after this, we're going to have to touch on the most difficult part. What caused an entire continent to gradually become isolated, not geographically, but in terms of its future. Let's go back to Berlin for a bit. Rent prices are increasing. The market is tight. Young people are struggling. The press calls it a housing crisis and often stops there. But when leaving Berlin, the story is no longer simple. In many parts of Eastern and Southern Europe, housing is not scarce at all. What's missing is the ability to turn a house into a stable life. A notable figure. After the economic transition, the number of newly built homes in many Eastern European countries decreased by over 70%. Imagine a city where 7 out of 10 cranes disappear. Not because there's no land, but because no one dares to invest in the future. Meanwhile, house prices are rising 10 to 30 times faster than income, depending on the region. To put it simply, buying an apartment now is like saving for 20 to 30 years from now, while life is happening right now. I asked a young couple in northern Italy why they were delaying having children. They don't talk about personal freedom. They talked about doctor's appointments, winter heating costs, and kindergarten tuition, milk, education, healthcare, all are increasing faster than wages. It's like an escalator going down while you're trying to step up. A man in Bulgaria told me, very calmly, "We don't hate children. We are afraid of seeing our children lacking." That saying stayed with me for a very long time. The media often suggests that Europeans no longer want to get married. But standing among these empty villages, hearing these stories, I wondered, is this a choice or a reaction to pressure? A gentle but unavoidable irony. We organize countless conferences about family, while the cost of maintaining one becomes increasingly out of reach. When the economy makes having children a gamble, society doesn't need to force anyone. People will withdraw on their own. And when millions of such individual decisions add up, the result isn't a noisy crisis, but a prolonged silence, childless towns, closed schools. What do you think? If the cost of living continues to outpace income, would this story be different? If these questions make you want to delve deeper, stay with me. And if you subscribe to the channel, consider it a way to fully follow this journey. Because right after this, we'll have to look straight at the next piece of the puzzle. Who's leaving, who's staying, and what Europe is losing in the process. When a village disappears, most of us think of collapse. But after my actual journey, what I saw in Europe wasn't a collapse. But it's more like an orderly retreat. No alarm, no panicked crowds. It's just people are leaving one by one. In Moldova, the population has decreased by about 70% in a few decades. To put it simply, it's like 7 out of 10 chairs in a church disappearing, but the service still continues, with only a few people remaining seated. Latvia lost about 25% of its population. Romania lost over 14%. These figures are usually only seen after a war. But here, it's happening in peacetime. I asked a middle-aged man in Romania where his children were. He answered very quickly, without hesitation. The one in Germany, the one in Italy. The youngest is planning to move to Canada, he replied calmly, as if accepting it. And that's what makes me think the most. And when I looked closer, I realized that those who left first were rarely the weakest. They are often doctors, engineer, skilled craftsmen. Young people still have energy. In Hungary alone, after joining the EU, thousands of doctors left the country. Poland has hundreds of thousands of highly skilled workers living and working in other countries. It's like a team where the best player is transferred every season, but the fans are still asked to believe in the future. A light, but unavoidable jab. Europe is exporting people and importing promises. Back to Berlin. Yes, this city is really crowded. The apartment is cramped, high price. People are coming in continuously. But Berlin isn't Europe. It's like a brightly lit island, while all around are darker, quieter areas. Young people from Eastern and Southern Europe are flocking to the centers. The result is that a few cities are overloaded and thousands of communities are drained. It's like a body where blood only rushes to the heart, while the limbs gradually get cold. The question posed is far from comfortable. When the young, the healthy, and those capable of building the future all leave, who will be left to maintain these places? And is this wave of departures just a personal choice, or is it gradually becoming a collective trend? The media often talks about global opportunities and freedom of movement. It's all true, on a personal level. But at the societal level, millions of rational decisions can create a very unstable outcome. No one leaves because they hate their homeland. They left because they didn't see a way forward there. So the question for you is, if you're 25 years old, skilled, and see only closed doors around you, will you stay or will you leave too? And when those who could leave have left, we must face the final and most difficult question. What will the remaining societies look like when they are left with only the elderly, few young people, and very few options? If you want to follow the full picture, stay with me and subscribe to the channel if you find these questions worth continuing to delve into. Because right after this, we'll be talking about the final destination of this trend. A Europe aging faster than it can adapt. If you're expecting an apocalyptic scenario, you'll probably be disappointed. Europe didn't collapse overnight. There's no moment when everything goes dark. What I see in 2026 is a very slow decline, quiet, compact, and almost polite. Major cities like Berlin are still lit up. The shops are still crowded. The conference is still taking place regularly. But just go to the edge, and you'll see the backbone of society thinning. Here's a thought-provoking statistic. Many forecasts indicate that Eastern Europe could lose about 1% of its GDP annually over the next few decades due to aging and labor shortages. It sounds small, but imagine. It's like you lose a step every year, while still having to climb the same building. After 20 to 30 years, you'll still be standing there, just much lower than other places. We often talk about growth, innovation, and technology. But at a very basic level, society functions through people. When fewer young people have to support many elderly people, the system doesn't collapse. It stretches, like a rope pulled for too long. I met a man in East Germany who was retired, and he said to me, "It's very peaceful here. The only thing is, we don't know who will do the smallest things for us." That question didn't appear in the economic report, but it's present in every empty village. Schools are not closed because children are naughty, and because there are no more children to close the door for. There's an image that keeps coming back to me. Rome, at the end of its era. It's not the day of collapse, but rather the decades before that. The roads are still there. The building is still standing. Laws are still being written. But gradually, there weren't enough people left to maintain everything. Europe in 2026 doesn't resemble a fallen empire. It's like a big house, still heated, but fewer and fewer people live in it. We talk a lot about the future of Europe, while its present is becoming increasingly quiet. In this video, I mention Berlin frequently. Berlin is probably the most tense city in Europe right now. Housing is expensive, the pace of life is fast, and the pressure is great. But that's not the whole story. Berlin is not the only example. It is the convergence point of what is leaving elsewhere. If you only look at the center, you'd think everything is still fine. But if you look at the isolated regions, you'll see a Europe that is shrinking, not because of a lack of money, but because of a lack of people who believe staying is a reasonable option. So the question for you is, are we witnessing a natural cycle of wealthy societies, or the consequences of decades-long decisions? And when you put it all together, the empty villages, the delayed families, the young people leaving, a final question begins to emerge. What will be left when silence becomes the norm? If you want to go to that question with me, stay a little longer, and if you subscribe to the channel, consider it a way to follow the whole story to the end. Perhaps these towns aren't haunted at all. Perhaps they are just the future of Europe arriving sooner in a few places. Empty roads. The houses are locked. It's not because of the confrontations. It's not because of the disaster, but because humans are gradually retreating, little by little. So the real question isn't, when will these places come back to life? But rather, if your child doesn't live here, who are these places existing for? Do you think this is the natural cycle of a wealthy society, or the result of decades-long decisions that very few people were ever consulted about? Please leave your thoughts below. I read almost everything, and it's the different perspectives that make this conversation worthwhile. If you find this slow, in-depth, and unobtrusive style of analysis worth following, subscribe to the channel. Not to show support, but to not miss the next part of the picture. What you just saw is not intended to attack any individual or group. This is a journey of observation, synthesis, and questioning. Not a judgment, and certainly not a call to action. Silence is not always harmless. Sometimes, it's the first sign of something receding. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next videos.